Hey, welcome back to the Ping Pong Flick Show. My name is Chris Wong. Today, I want to lightly touch on a lot of people who are saying that the Snyder situation with Joss Whedon is very similar to the Richard Lester and Richard Donner thing back for Superman 2. And I just want to spot out some differences on this. Now, there's probably a lot of things more involved in a Richard Donner case, for back then, back in the 1970s, 80s. It's not very well, told in a way that social media was very involved with to now. But going through the basics of what actually happened. So, Richard Donner, right? He actually was filming Superman 1 and Superman 2. And because of the long over budgets and long timelines and delays and things like that, the Salkins, the producers wanted to replace him. They were kind of that there was a lot of tension between the producers and him. And so they brought on Richard Lester to do something about it, right? And so we're not really sure. There's a lot of debate on what actually happened. Some say that Donner was invited back after Superman 1 was finished done, and then Superman 2 was put on hold. They invited Richard Donner back. Richard Donner refused to come back, but his story is that he said they didn't invite him back. He didn't even know they're shooting not Richard. He didn't know that Richard Lester was filming Superman 2. But in hindsight now, it's according to Richard Donner, with after Richard Donner cut, and I talked about this before, where he looked at it and there was an agreement, there was a director's agreement thing, and then he said that he looked at it and he didn't approve of it, so that he didn't want to write his name on it. But before that, there were issues about the scenes and things like that, right? And there were issues about having Richard Lester as credited as the director. And this is, I want to read it out to you. However, under strict new guidelines from the Directors Guild of America, Richard Lester needed to reshoot several scenes Donner had already completed in order to receive full directorial credit. Whoa, boy, does that sound familiar. If you look back at some of even the VFX reels that are popping out now, and a lot of people have cut into there's a lot of things going on Twitter, but they've put scenes of the original trailers that we know for a fact that Zack Snyder had done because he was still involved on the project, and that we compare it to either the VFX reel or, in this case, the theatrical cut, and you can clearly see that there was something reshot there. Exact scenes reshot. One in particular is Aquaman saving the fisherman when he brings the fisherman into the bar. That scene was reshot. When he throws the man on the table, that whole thing, including this one's on him, and he picks up the bottle, is reshot. That was reshot by Joss Whedon. It looks totally different. And now people are saying that, and looking at the pictures on Twitter, the scene where Bruce Wayne is sitting down and Barry Allen comes in, those look like it was reshot as well, as it doesn't match up. And there are a lot more that's been going on. So it seems like Joss Whedon tried to do a lot more, tried to reshoot scenes to the effect so he could possibly get the directorial credit. So Stephen Colbert from Screen Rant did mention on Twitter that the case for Zack Snyder, Joss Whedon, is different because Zack Snyder had actually filmed all principal photography, 100%. And he put down in also an example is that for Solo, because Solo was only 90% completed, they were able to get Ron Howard on board and reshoot or do some scenes and extend principal photography in order to get the credit. But because Zack Snyder did 100%, that's why Zack Snyder gets the full credit. As opposed to Richard Donner and Richard Lester, it looks like it didn't finish. He didn't finish principal photography as well, as it was put on hold. So it doesn't say how much percentage here, but you can quite see here that Richard Lester reshot shot a lot of scenes. The principal photography was extended and things like that. So it's possible that that's why Richard Lester got the directorial credit as opposed to Richard Donner. And so we look at that, and we also recognize that this has been 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago, that this has happened. And in 20 years ago, over 20 years, 25 or something like that, I can't do math, but over this amount of time, there is something to be said there about the era of those days. As you know now, those years ago, we then had the technology that we have today. Our society is different. Our society now is very much instant gratification. Our society is really evolved on through social media. Social media drives a lot of things in our society, drives movements. There's bandwagons, things like that happen in this society that is truly different from back then. Back then, most people probably didn't even know that there was a situation between Richard Donner and Richard Lester. We know now more now, quickly and more out in the open than ever before. There is not just newspapers, we have bloggers, blog sites, all these things. There's a lot more awareness for this type of thing. So we cannot really apply Superman 2 knowledge and apply it to now. Is it okay to think about that in those terms, right? Is it okay because it is a fact within our own history. We can only bring out something that we know in order to apply it to what it is today. Okay, I'll quote something from Neil deGrasse Tyson here. And you should listen to him. He's a really fantastic guy. But he said something about along these lines, right? I'm just paraphrasing him. But Stephen Hawking had said that we shouldn't contact aliens out of space because they will come here and they'll probably try to, colonize us and things. You'll probably come here to colonize us. They'll probably here with their weapons, mass destruction, and try to take us over in an imperialistic fashion. Neil deGrasse Tyson said that that may not be the case. He's not ready to say that per se. Why? Because Stephen Hawking is just using factual historical knowledge from the past. It's something that he recognizes before because that's what the English has done. They came to America and they came through, to Spain and all that, and if they did that, they came in an imperialistic fashion. They took over the indigenous cultures and things like that, and in a militaristic way in those fashions, they came over. So he applied that factual historic knowledge to what could happen in the future if aliens had come down. But that's because that's all we know. We don't really know what's going to happen in the future. We don't really know what these aliens are. And I could go on and on about how possibly how chimpanzees are only like 99% DNA difference from us, but that 1% is that intelligence. So maybe aliens don't even see us as intelligent at all. So we could go on for that, and because I love talking about that stuff anyway. But I just want to apply that here. We only know factual information from our history, and that is that there's a situation that is almost similar to what we have now, and that could be the Gareth Edwards, that could be the Rogue One Gareth Edwards, that could be Solo, that could be multiple things, but for Warner Brothers, it is the Richard Donner, Richard Lester case, and how Richard Donner was able to get the Richard Donner cut after. So that is the only way we could actually try to guess what's going to happen. But because our society has changed so much, and the fact that the situation between the principle of photography and how much was done has changed a while, also to the fact that we don't know if Snyder was actually either fired or was let go or was forced to leave. We know Jim Lee himself has stated that Zack Snyder was not fired. We had that one reporter from that one website, I forgot it was a Deadline, that said, who came out all the blue because he was leaving the industry and he just wanted to drop a bomb, that Zach was fired. Then we had Warner Brothers' own interpretation of Zach actually wanting to leave, not through creative differences, but because of his daughter. And so there's all these different stories, and in between all those lines is the actual truth. For people who are saying that this is the truth, you actually don't know any better unless you are Zack Snyder and unless you work for Warner Brothers. That also means that I don't know any better, but I am more optimistic and open minded to actually partake in everything, right? You want to be open minded about it. We can't just say things are impossible. We also have things to believe in, and there's a lot of faith involved within in that. But you have to wonder that there's more to the story and not just close yourself off. We've already closed ourselves off. A lot of people close themselves off by listening to bloggers and source people who are saying the Snyder Cut does not exist. And we know now the Snyder Cut does exist, although they try to say the Snyder Cut does not exist, meaning it's a push of a button and we can release it now. We understand that the hashtag release the Snyder Cut really actually equates to hashtag finish and release the Snyder Cut, because we know it's not a completely finished product. We already know that, but it does exist, and we already know that, and a lot of these sites and these videos are confirming that now because of Jay Oliver, who worked in that industry, who was there, who can testify that says it was put in a full timeline. It's not 100% finished in the terms that it was very well done. All the VFX is 100% complete, but it does exist in that type of form. So the cut does exist, but now we're back into how is it going to release, and things are done. And so I have a help with like a law grad named Alex Lobo on Twitter, and we've been talking. And one question I wanted to say is that we know what things are transpired from what the media tells us. That's the one point in the story. But there's always something behind. Is there an actual legal battle or thing or negotiation that would be made public? So there are, in a way, things are happening that you're not aware of. Just because you're not aware of it does not mean it's not actually happening. And I think if you close your mind off to those facts, that things are greater than you, that the world doesn't revolve around you and you revolve around the world, the world is working at that time, then that means when you say you're crazy, the Snyder Cut does not exist, that means you don't actually know. You're not open-minded to feel that maybe you yourself don't know, right? I can also say the Snyder Cut does exist before what Jay Oliver said, and at that time, that's my hypothetical question. We tried to get some evidence to that fact, to show that the Snyder Cut does exist, and even with what Larry Fong had said and everything, now with the confirmation from Jay Oliver, we can actually say. I cannot say for 100% fact the Snyder Cut exists in a finished 100% form, but I can agree, and I hope you can agree, that it is not finished, but it does exist. Now, how is it going to release? We have gone through so many different theories on how it will be released, and it comes down to the law, right? It does come down to law and who owns the actual property. And like you said, like Steven said, and John Gorza, he's actually been, they're talking to each other about that, and it's a really interesting thing to be talking about. I think there's more to it than we actually meet the eye, and that's the mystery about it. What is actually going on behind the scenes? Now, I came up with the legal thing. I'm still trying to find it as I'm talking here, but there are so many factors involved in it that to pinpoint a solid answer if Zach is allowed to release it. And if there is a private legal negotiation battle, then we wouldn't necessarily know about it, right? They wouldn't necessarily know about it. And Alex Lobo did say through this, it depends on your interpretation of legal battle. Until a party files a complaint in court, will a legal dispute become public. The only time you would hear about a legal battle negotiation in entertainment is if one party wants to leverage the other. And so, wondering, we haven't heard anything. And there are possible things happening in terms of the legal issues. Maybe Zach has lawyers, maybe Warner Brothers has lawyers, and they're in a room. The only people who know about what's going on are the people in that room. So sources and bloggers say nothing will release, it can never happen, don't actually know. They don't actually know. The sources, the people that are above them who are telling them, and the sources of the sources and the publicists may not actually know. Because if it's under legal negotiations now, the only people who know about it are in that room. It's like being at a doctor, and then the doctor can only say, like you say to a doctor, and then the doctor says, well, you got cancer or you got something. That information is private to you and confidential, patient confidentiality. I only know about it. The doctor knows about it. You know about it. That does not leave this room in terms of that case. So that could be also what's happening altogether. But so that's what I wanted to get here, is that nothing is impossible, right? Nothing is impossible. There could be a possibility of release. We apply the Richard Lester and Richard Donner case to what we know now, but because times have changed and the technology has changed, and the fact that the situation for that is similar yet very different to what Snyder and Whedon is doing now, has done now, especially to the fact that Whedon is now gone. He didn't get the directorial credit, and also the producers are gone now, right? We got John Berg, Jeff Johns, they're all gone. It's a completely, totally different Warner Brothers now than what was before during that time that happened. And there's a possibility that there is a private legal battle or negotiation going on right now without each party leveraging the other. And that could be a good thing, because if there is no leverage, that means maybe it's more of a peaceful private thing, right? Once we start hearing some ugliness of it, maybe then there's something to talk about at that. But that's where beliefs and faiths stem from, and that's why I like to have faith, and I like to do believe, and like to be optimistic about it. And I still don't understand why people want to deter that away. They take time out of their own day to tell people to not spend time on certain things. So I do still have faith that the Snyder could be released. I don't know when. I don't know when and how, but I do have faith that even though a lot of people say it's impossible, that won't happen, faith is the first factor in a life devoted to service. Without it, nothing is possible. Okay? With faith, nothing is impossible. That's a direct quote from Mary McLeod Bethune. Thank you so much for subscribing. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.